Story 1. The Whispering Pines. I never believed in the old stories, but now I wish I had. Camping in North Carolina's ancient forests had always been on my bucket list. I craved the solitude, the escape from the digital world. But I got more than I bargained for when I decided to spend a weekend alone in a forgotten campsite deep in the woods, far from the popular spots. The air was still that first night, too still. The kind of silence that made you feel watched. The trees loomed tall and motionless, their branches intertwining above me like skeletal fingers. I tried to brush off the eerie feeling, convincing myself it was just my overactive imagination. Around midnight, I woke to the softest whispering, so faint it was like the wind itself was speaking. My tent rustled, and I froze. It wasn't the sound of an animal or a branch brushing against the fabric. It was different, deliberate. I unzipped the tent and peered outside. Nothing, just the tall pines swaying slightly in the moonlight. The whispering stopped, but the feeling of unease lingered. I tried to go back to sleep, telling myself it was nothing, just the wind playing tricks. But the next morning I noticed something strange. A circle of strange symbols drawn in the dirt outside my tent. They weren't there the night before, I was certain. They looked ancient, like markings from a long-forgotten time. My pulse quickened. I had heard tales of the Cherokee warning signs, symbols meant to ward off evil. But who, or what, had made them? That night, the whispering returned, louder this time, more insistent. It wasn't just one voice. There were many, male, female, old, young, all speaking in a language I couldn't understand. And then came the laughter, soft and unsettling, like children playing in the shadows. I didn't dare leave my tent. I kept my flashlight close, shining it around, but the beam did nothing to pierce the overwhelming darkness. The laughter grew closer, circling my camp, until it was right outside my tent. And then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. When dawn finally came, I packed up and left. But as I hiked back, I saw those symbols carved into trees along the trail, leading me out like a twisted breadcrumb path. I haven't been back since, and I never will. Story 2. The Forgotten Trail. I thought I was alone out here, but something was watching. A friend told me about an old camping spot off the beaten path, a place rarely visited by anyone. It was supposed to be a perfect spot for solitude, nestled near the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I packed my gear and made my way to the Forgotten Trail. Everything was perfect during the day. The towering trees, the cool mountain air, the distant sound of a river flowing nearby. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the woods took on a different feeling, one of isolation and something darker. It started with the footsteps. At first I thought it was just an animal wandering near my campsite. But the more I listened, the more I realized these weren't random. They were deliberate. Slow, methodical steps that seemed to circle my camp, always just out of sight. I shone my flashlight into the woods, but all I saw were shadows, branches swaying in the breeze, and the occasional flicker of movement I couldn't quite focus on. Every time I thought I caught something, it vanished before my eyes. The footsteps persisted, closer now. I tried calling out, but the woods swallowed my voice. And then, just as quickly as they had started, the footsteps stopped. Silence fell, thicker than before, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. In the morning, I found strange, claw-like marks on the trees around my camp, deep and jagged, as though something, or someone, had been marking its territory. I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. On the second night, the footsteps returned, but this time, they didn't stay at a distance. Something walked right up to the edge of my campsite, stopping just outside the circle of light. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, an oppressive presence watching me. Then came the breathing, deep, slow, and unnervingly close. It was right there, just beyond the glow of my fire. My heart raced as I clutched my flashlight, scanning the perimeter, but I saw nothing. Suddenly, the air grew cold, unnaturally cold, and the fire dimmed, flickering as if struggling to stay lit. That's when I saw them. Glowing eyes in the darkness, watching from the trees. There were too many to count. I froze, paralyzed by fear. By morning, I was gone, racing down the trail, but those eyes, they followed me. Story 3. The Lake of Shadows. They say the lake is cursed, but I didn't believe it until I saw them. My friends and I decided to camp by a remote lake deep in the mountains of North Carolina. We had heard stories, of course, tales of strange sightings near the water, of campers who had gone missing. But we were young, bold, and stupid. The first night was uneventful, and we spent it laughing around the campfire. The second night, though, was different. We noticed strange lights over the lake, faint but pulsing. At first, we thought it was just reflections, but then the lights began to move, darting across the surface in unnatural patterns. And then we heard the singing. It was soft, melodic, and chilling, as if the lake itself was calling out to us. None of us could explain it. The sound seemed to rise from the water and echo across the mountains. One of my friends, Dave, insisted we investigate. The rest of us were hesitant, but his enthusiasm was infectious, so we followed. As we approached the shore, the lights disappeared, but the singing grew louder. Dave stepped into the water, and that's when we saw them. Figures, just beneath the surface. Their faces were pale, eyes wide and unblinking, staring up at us from the depths. We froze, horrified, as they began to rise, their arms reaching out toward Dave. He screamed and bolted back to camp, and we followed, too terrified to look back. The singing stopped, but the terror remained. None of us slept that night. We packed up at dawn and left without a word. I've heard stories about the lake since then, tales of ancient spirits trapped beneath the water, cursed to remain forever. But seeing those faces, I'll never go near that place again.